Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I've read, everything I'm reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit chat. And this week was a good reading week. I feel like I've been chipping away at an awful lot of things though, and not quite finishing as much as I've been actively sort of touching. But let's dive into the reading. So the books that I finished this week, let's start with a shorty for Shorty September. I read The Lantern of Lost Memories, and this is a translated work as well. So I will put the author and translator's name on the screen with the book as well. So this is very short. On audio, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours. And usually in this type of cozy shop story from Japan and Korea, there's a very cyclic, sort of circular type of maybe oral storytelling vibe almost to them, where you're repeating little vignettes. This kind of has that, but it felt so much more meaty and substantial to me in that short story. So this was above the rest in terms of what I've read for other stuff in the cozy shop type of storytelling that fits that mold. So here we are in the framing narrative of this guy who's working at a shop where people show up when they die. And so that's kind of an odd premise to start with. And that makes it sound like it's much heavier than it should be and that it's about death, but it feels so much more about life because these people are building a lantern with one memory or a photo from every year of their life. And we do not go through all of those memories. We just pop into one memory and really sink into it and get a good story of a meaningful moment in that person's life from a particular year. And so they jump all over the place in terms of the type of person. So it doesn't feel very repetitive. So like we jump from a woman who is elderly at the time she died. She had 92 years of life. Yet she's remembering back to her existence as a nursery school teacher and the care and love she had for the children there and the way that was such a wonderful part of her life. And then we shift to a Yakuza member who has a shop that isn't really there to be a shop. It's kind of secretly a front, but he has this relationship with a non-neurotypical person who works there, who's very unusual and thinks very differently from him. And we see the same sort of caring that we saw in the first story. And so this was a weirdly soft story, despite the content being a little on the harder edge. So yeah, I felt like this had some significant substance to it. It had a lot to say, while still remaining very much in that cozy, calming, gentle vein. So this was a great one. The next thing I finished was much to the opposite end of the spectrum. It was a historical fantasy adventure, and that was The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. So as far as I know, this is not linked to her Daevabad series, but it theoretically could take place in the same universe. It has that same feeling of being very, very grounded in real world, and yet having a massive non-real, mystical, sort of mythic fantasy aspect where we're sort of getting very Egyptian folklore with jinn contracts involved. In this case, there's sort of a marriage contract that is used by the jinn. But we're starting with a very heavy character focus. So Amina seems to be this pirate who's sort of retired. She's had a child, and her child is beginning to grow up and old enough to understand things when something comes up and sets her off on a journey where she has to set aside everything she's set up for herself and leave and take off to do this. Gather the crew and try to stop a catastrophic situation, more or less. So that all feels like the usual tropes of a typical sort of gathering the crew adventure story, but this is so much slower. And so it was kind of hard to get into at first, and I think may not pay off for people who are looking for high action adventure, because we're building so much about Amina and her past. This is being told in a style that's great because it is sort of her telling her own story to someone, and her telling someone how to tell her story as well. We get little random asides on the audio that's delivered very, very well. So you know it's coming after the fact, where she's looking back on this adventure she's had after it's happened. And she's telling it to us, more or less. And so that framing, I think, keeps it very engaging as we're slowly seeing this normalcy that she's established falling away and her taking off. But once it does get into the adventure, I loved how humorous it was, how fun and lively all of the characters were. And because we had spent so much of that time building up the world and the character, it really felt like something I could attach to and really was getting behind in support of the adventure that she's going on. However, I would say that maybe one of the things that didn't quite work for me is the pacing, because as I said, we're in that very slow build for a really long time, probably 30 to 40% of the book. We're in buildup, and then we finally get going. And so the pacing felt a little off. We also, this kind of worked for me, but may not work for everyone. We don't get a hard magic system at all, and the world building feels like there are gaps there. So I thought it worked. I thought it left questions that I didn't need to be answered. Like, it feels like a fleshed out world that is all there. It's just not all explained to you. But if you're looking for something with very heavily explained magic and a really fleshed out world, this is not that. There are lots of moments that you just kind of have to roll with, certainly. So I had such a fun time with this, and Amina is sort of an older woman character, which I love. Love to see a woman who is very sure of herself. She's witty and always seems to be a little bit ahead of the game with others, except for sort of the djinn. But she is such a character that you want to almost befriend, but yet see she's so sharp and sarcastic that I think you might want to watch your back if you were friends with her. So other than that, the last thing that I read this week is The Irish RM by Somerville and Ross. And I've been reading this since spring this year, and I've made the executive decision to DNF it because I have made it almost 300 pages. I'm nearly halfway through. This is a collection of about 30 some odd short stories. And it's not what I was expecting. So I bought this at a charity sale, sight unseen. I knew nothing about it. But on the back it says that, but as he passes judgment on a range of cases and characters that would have driven Solomon to drink, he learns that in Ireland, 2 and 2 are just as likely to make 5 or 3 or even nothing at all. And so that sense of humor gets me a little bit. The idea of him being a resident magistrate, which I don't know what that is. I still don't know what that is after reading half of this, because we never actually see him do his job at any point in any of the stories that I read. None. I didn't see him tackle a single case. So I don't know when that's going to happen. It's probably in the back half of this, apparently. But this was not that book. So I feel like I was missold. More or less, I got into this and we see him arriving at this small rural area and taking up lodgings there. And he clearly has a sense of elite and affluence that off-put me at the start slightly. And that remains fairly prominent, that there's a class divide, which is understandable. But most prominently, thematically, through the stories that I read, is fox hunting. That was way more major to this book than anything else. I still do not know what a registered magistrate does. We never saw him actually do his job, and I thought that was going to be the whole point of this. Instead, he's constantly out with the wealthy doing these fox hunts. There's always horses and dogs around in every single story, even if there's not fox hunting. They're not particularly well treated. They're not like overtly abused at most points, but they're just not well treated, and that's fairly normal for the time, but it's really, really off-putting to me. And I kept going and was not getting any attachment to any of the characters. I nearly gave up about the 100-page mark. And then we finally got a recurring character, and she's the person he's getting married to, but for their wedding story ends up being them going on a fox hunt. Nothing about the actual wedding. Literally, I'm not kidding. Like, the wedding doesn't even take place in the story. I was baffled, but I did keep on because we finally kind of got recurring characters. I was like, okay, we're gonna build some relationship with these people. We really didn't. I don't feel like I got to know any of the characters. At one point, there's a literal horse thief, and I assume registered resident magistrate is some sort of law job, either a judge or a lawyer. But they just sort of laugh it off, and not in a over-the-top way, but in a, well, he's a cad, but what can you do kind of deal. And I just did not get it. I didn't get it. So I think I am finished with this, and this is probably going to go to the little free library because I'm baffled. I'm just baffled. I don't know what the point of this was. I don't feel like I got to know any of the characters, including the primary character. I also don't know what an RM is still, despite having read nearly 300 pages of this. So that was a big disappointment. But fortunately, I've been reading it in teeny tiny chunks over several months, so it has not really significantly taken up much space in my mind. Anyway, onward to better things. Definitely, this week I have been currently reading The Girl Who Kept the Castle by Ryan Grodin. I'm working on The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, and I also started my first BookTube Prize book as well. So those are all going well and much more capturing my attention than that did. I also, shifting gears to mixed media, I think the only thing I finished that I have to talk about today is The Thursday Murder Club. Hot movie on Netflix now. I've not read the book, and I kind of debated whether I wanted to wait in the massive hold line for it and then watch the movie, but I decided not to worry about it. I'm still in the massive hold line for it. I do want to read the book, and watching the movie affirmed that I want to read the book. But it was so good. It was so good and charming and cozy while still having a lot to say, I think. I love that Thursday Murder Club as a premise follows these older characters who are in a senior living situation, and at two prongs. We've got sort of the story number one that is the underlying story of this senior living place being in threat, despite it being really wonderful. And then we have the other, which is sort of the murder mystery. And this group of seniors who are played by extremely fantastic actors, including Helen Mirren, who's just sharp and witty and so great. They all are banding together to figure out these cold cases, and then all of those skills are coming into play to serve them in this larger premise. So I like that it has sort of two layers to it. I think there could have been more depth. Like, I've seen other shows that are doing similar things, or read books that are doing similar things that I think are better, but the cast for this is just so stellar and top-notch that I feel like it really won me over even more, despite my having seen things that did the story better. So casting, whoever was doing that, just absolutely top-notch. And I have to assume some of that is down to Richard Osmond having incredible connections in the British acting world, because he's a showrunner and writer and stuff. So yeah, it is so good. So good. So I enjoyed that, and I will be looking forward to whenever, probably in like a year, the hold comes in for the book. I also watched some other stuff, but I think I'm going to hold off on talking about it to wrap things up together, because I'm sort of going on a theme in terms of movie watching right now because I have the time. So sort of shifting gears into life and the general slowdown of jobless life and navigating that. I guess let's start with the negative and just imparting how bad the experience is in terms of the US healthcare situation. I knew going in that is very tied to your employment, obviously, so that was going to be the worst thing I was going to have to deal with. And it has been exactly as bad as I expected, if not worse. So for those outside of the US, or those that have not been through this, you have sort of the option to continue your coverage from your employer by paying for it on your own if you're eligible. You have to sort of hope you're eligible if you want to do that, because you can't really verify anything before you do it, which is great fun. But it also, you are going to go out of coverage no matter what you do as well. So there's a time period where they have to send you, like your employer have to send you notification about that and about the process to do that. That happens after your employment. So I'm out of coverage now completely, which is horrible and would be catastrophic if anything goes wrong, right? So they were very fast about doing that though. So I already have that. And kicked off that process. Unfortunately, the cost to do that is very exorbitant. And so now I'm weighing where it is slightly more than I had planned for. I even planned for beyond what I was expecting based on pay stubs and stuff. And it's still more than that, unfortunately, which really stinks. But the alternative of what's available to me is extremely exorbitant or a very low cost plan. And everything looks like the low-cost plan probably will not cover the medication that I'm on, which is also very expected, and I pretty much knew that would be the case going in, because low-cost plans don't cover anything. So now I'm in this sort of weighing things of, do I pay for the medication out of pocket? That will be slightly more than the plan will be if I keep my exorbitant employee plan, and just balancing that. But I can't see anything. So if you've never dealt with US insurance, you can't actually find out prices that you're going to pay for medications before you're requesting them, more or less. So it looks like the plan doesn't cover the medication. It looks like maybe I can get special approval for coverage, but even if I can get that, I can't tell how much it would cost me. So I know what the medication costs without any coverage. I don't know what it costs if I can get some approval for this to happen. But I do know that if I have to get it without coverage on the low-cost plan, it will be more than the very robust, nice employer-based plan that I have. So it kind of makes the most sense to just keep that, even though I know I will be paying a huge amount for it month to month. But then I'll have the robust coverage. So I will at least, I think, be keeping that for a little while. And, wonderfully, I say sarcastically, if you turn down the continuation of your employment coverage, you can't go back and change your mind. Whereas if I take it, I can cancel it at any point and switch over to the low-cost plan. So it's very entrapping. And I am going into this basically having expected all of this, aware of all of this. Even there is sticker shock there, definitely, but still I'm like reminding myself, yeah, this is fine. We planned for this. I still am completely okay, and like everything is in line. It is a little bit more than I was expecting, but that's all right. For somebody who was going into this not prepared because they were in a crisis, or somebody that got fired, and is completely having the rug pulled out from under them, I cannot even fathom trying to navigate this, because it is such a Kafkaesque nightmare to try and deal with our healthcare system. So just the aspects of being forced to not have healthcare for a short while you deal with this, more or less, trying to figure out what to do when you can't see prices, is really, really horrible. So that's certainly the worst aspect. The best aspect, everything has been so much more calm. And just going through the slowdown, I'm still mentally adjusting, definitely, but I'm already feeling better at every level pretty much. And it's just very different. It's a very, very big adjustment to not have the daily work, or have that in the sights in the near future. Because I've always had sort of short vacations for the most part. And through my vacation, I'm always thinking about the stuff I'm going to need to do when I get back to work. And now I just don't have to. So that has been wonderful. Like a really small, stupid thing that I have been looking forward to that I got to do this week was just walking to the store. And that's probably sounds ridiculous to most people, especially if you're outside of the US, but like I have a store that's just slightly farther than the library branch I go to. I haven't even walked to the library branch this year at all. But when you're going to the store, it's like, I want to get everything done and be efficient and load up. So I can't just go for what I need, what I'm able to carry. And I happened to have gone to the store earlier in the week on the way somewhere and gotten most of my stuff. And then I definitely needed a couple of extra things that I forgot. So it was like my perfect opportunity. So I got to go walk to the store and stop by the library on my way. And it was just so calm and relaxing. And I didn't have anything I had to do. Same, I went to the park and I forgot my headphones. So I couldn't listen to an audiobook, or I made the decision to not turn around and get my headphones and just go without headphones and walk without listening to anything while I was at the park. And it was just so calming. And so I wasn't trying to cram in the maximum of doing things because I don't feel like I have to. And that has been really, really great. So I'm feeling continued affirmation that things are pretty good despite the annoying bumps here at the beginning of getting things lined up. So anyway, so it's been a fairly quiet week. Nice, just calm down and resetting time. So I can now get into whatever my new routine, if I have one, is gonna be. Yeah, so that's it for me, I think, for this weekend. I should have a bunch of recommendations. I definitely have saved some, but I forgot to write them down. So I will amass them for next week, I guess. That's where we're at. But I think with that, I'm going to leave you for the day. So I'm wishing you a wonderful week in reading and in life. And thank you so very much for watching.